I'm pretty sure most of you have heard it by now. There is an initiative to stop killing games. Brought forward by accused farms, Europeans can save gaming. Now, the reason why this is important for me in particular is because I can actually sign and potentially change it. And so for me, the discussion around why we should do this has been very important, and I've spent the last couple of days and streams talking and gathering information about the topic. So I not only took a look at the video itself, but I also took a look at a video from Pirate Software, number 1 and number 2 actually, he made 2 videos in it. Then I also took a look at how Asmongold reacted to it, and finally Rossmann. And so this is going to be more or less the culmination of all of these takes or ideas from different perspectives, whether that be the game developer, Pirate Software, whether that be more of a legal person and customer rights person in Rossmann, or the gamer, which I consider to be Asmongold, with a little bit more knowledge on how it could be behind the scenes. And then of course my perspective as well. And so we're gonna start with the reaction that I had on stream and then move on. What is this? Europeans can save gaming. 5 days ago, accused farms. The Europeans can save video games from being destroyed. The European Citizens Initiative has just launched and represents the biggest and most ambitious chance to create a new law against publishers destroying games they have already sold to you. Get EU citizens to sign it.
Hi, I'm Ross. For the past several months, I've been working on a campaign to stop the destruction of video games.
Yeah?
See, most video games work indefinitely, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But more and more are being designed to stop working the second support ends from the publisher. A kill switch, essentially. It's a form of planned obsolescence, where publishers are destroying games they've already sold to you, but keeping your money. And this is all preventable. Some people don't understand that. It's just a terrible practice for everyone involved. Now, most of my efforts have gone towards challenging the legality of this practice in various countries.
How?
Because it's so consumer hostile, it's not clear if what's going on is even legal.
Okay.
That's still ongoing. But now we have a new option, proposing new law. Now we have a European Citizens Initiative devoted to halting the destruction of video games. You can read it yourself. This would require publishers to leave games they have sold to customers in a working state at the time of shutdown, without requiring any further connection to them or affiliated parties for the games to function. How they would do this would be up to them. This would also apply to free-to-play games that contain microtransactions.
It requires video games sold to the customers to be in a reasonably working state at the time of shutdown / end of support. But how you're supposed to do that? You need servers to run, let's say, a live service game. Play WoW offline, yeah, like how are you going to play World of Warcraft offline? I mean, yes, there's private servers. That's not like the company's doing. Blizzard doesn't do private servers. Prohibit any requirements for video games sold to customers to connect to the publisher or affiliated parties after the support ends. So essentially, if you want to connect to some other, I don't know, server to play the game, you should be able to do that. Let's say you buy World of Warcraft. You can now connect to a private server and play World of Warcraft, to a custom server. That is your private, like in Minecraft, essentially. Require the above. Also apply to video games that sell game assets or features, microtransactions to customers. So essentially the game's free, but they make money with microtransactions. This is a great idea, but it just won't work. There's like, you need money to run these. Where's the money gonna come from? Like, it feels like they're taking money out of the equation.
This would not require publishers to give up any of their intellectual property rights, give up their source code, though that one would still be nice. It wouldn't require endless support. They can end it anytime they want as far as we're concerned. They wouldn't need to host servers, though they would have to either patch out that requirement or else allow customers to host them privately.
Okay, so essentially if the support ends, they can't pay the servers anymore. A third party, let's say I myself, I have a server, I could go host the server and people can connect to my server now. I think that doesn't work, man, because now I'm responsible for the entire data that's going through the server.
Assume any liability for what customers do with their copies of games. And finally, nothing about this initiative would have any impact on publisher business practices while the game is being supported. In other words, publishers can continue doing whatever they want as long as you get to keep your game. It amazes me when some people say that's going too far in favor of the consumer.
I think the issue is here, hosting the server and the liability. This is where bots can happen. This is where cheating can happen and potentially harmful stuff happening. And now a third party is reliable for that. Who's gonna tell me that they will actually be held reliable? It could be like some server in Russia and you can't actually get to them. Could be some shady third party.
Now, if you're on board with this, you don't have to keep watching. You can go sign it right now.
It doesn't sound too bad of an idea. I'm purely talking from the perspective of a gamer. Now, I'd be interested in hearing what Asmongold thinks about this. And then you guys told me that Pirate Software talked about this too. I'd be interested to hear if there's like a disconnect between someone who has been behind the scenes and someone who's been in front of the screen all the time, like a gamer. I'm like somewhere in between. I'm like a game developer, but I've not been in the field long enough. I've been a gamer my entire life, but like I'm shifting in between the two. Now that we all know what the initiative is about, the next part is about why the initiative could go through if we were to bring it forth. How do you actually call that? With enough signs? Signatures, I guess, so that the politicians would take it more seriously.
Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games.
I think now he's trying to convince me to sign it, right? And why it will pass. Okay.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
See, like, I'm agreeing with this fact. If I buy a game, I should be able to play the game. So, for example, what I'm very sad about, and that might be like a weird take, I'm so sad that I can't play Diablo 3, the original version, the fucked up version. The auction house is a money-making machine. The Torment, I think it was Torment or Hell, was impossible to beat game. I can't play that anymore, but I want to play it. I would play this right now if I could. For me, it is a better game than the later part of Diablo 3. Because in that version of the game, not only were uniques very rare items were commonplace in your build. And so you had like a mix of those items, and every item you would pick up was like a, oh damn, I just got a yellow item, and that was cool. I like that. It was a lot of grinding, but I like it.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with. This would let them stay busy and avoid hard stuff. Now, unfortunately, what I would not bet on, because it's a huge unknown, is whether we can pass that signature threshold to begin with. In order for this to work, we need 1 million signatures. Okay, so currently the Stop Destroying Video Games initiative, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we can see that it has 233,000 signatures, which means we are still short of 770,000, something like that, because some of them will be invalidated. And you can see here the percentages of each of the regions that we need the signatures for. And, you know, some regions are better than others, which is what he's further going to discuss in the video, but I cut that part out. To be honest, I don't think it's that bad. Now, I would like to see the reaction of Pirate Software to this. Stop killing games is in the trash. So, like, here's what I think is happening with these downvotes. I think people often react with their feelings instead of with their brain. While the take of stop killing games is a good take, there's more to it than that. And so we should explore all avenues, not only the avenue of the gamer. That being said, I am a gamer too. And if I pay money for a game and then I can't play the game anymore, that fucking sucks, bro. That's what I think. Let's see what Mr. Pirate Software has to talk about it. It's a bit long, so I might watch this in twice the speed. We're gonna speed run this.
Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I am my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, it's an indie studio.
Wait,
for about 8 years now.
Sorry, I'm like in front of him. Okay.
We're a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord. And most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games, and that the next generation has the tools to do so, so their medium doesn't die out, and it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So that in mind, that community brought me this, and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case. Without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description.
Okay, so he's talking about a live service game that has a single player experience. I would be okay with the online part completely dying off because they can't pay the servers anymore. They can't support the game anymore. But let me play the single player campaign on my own. Why should I not be able to play it offline? Why should that not be a law? Because I don't see an issue. There's no server costs. There's no person that like has to balance the game anymore. If anything, maybe that can be done with mods. And I can keep my game. Like, listen, like it's a single player game. Let me play the game, bro. Like, I want to play. So that's my take. What does he say?
Says this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement inside the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do a billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's
that's true.
Right? So if we want to re-architect this, we have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, you know, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right.
Sure, and then we have like multiple years of this happening, and then you can't make a live service game in Europe anymore. That's actually a smart point. However, if you have a single-player game, that shouldn't go through a server. That should go to your local machine. It should run on your local machine. And that thing, that should not be disabled, because you should still be able to play that single-player part.
I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is these specific cases they called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's The Crew. So action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing anymore. If there's any cost associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about The Crew itself. And if we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that The Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they posted as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online-only.
Just noticed I had the stupid connection error on the top right. I'm not gonna redo the take, but it is how it is. Unfortunately, Pirate Software, when he talked about The Crew, he was talking about how the game was advertised as an online-only game. And that is true if we scroll down all the way to the bottom. I don't know why this is actually white, but supposed to be dark reader. Ah, there we go. Over here you can see the internet connection. Permanent internet connection is required to play. This, in my opinion, is not an advertisement for the game being online only. That is fine print that the majority of customers will not see. While yes, you could make the argument that the customer has to make due diligence to understand that they are buying an online-only game. In my opinion, most customers won't do that. And there's a reason why there needs to be rules to protect them against something like this. Because The Crew itself is advertised as a game, and The Crew itself also has a campaign in the game. So there is a pure single player aspect to the game, which is very important. So unfortunately, I think his point doesn't make much sense here, even though the rest of his points, which will go down further down the line, are actually very interesting and important.
If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online. And if the server's going to be shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online only. If it's a single-player experience that has online-only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online-only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I agree with you. That's a shitty business practice. That's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018, and then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to The Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to be the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was
one player right now, this one guy's racing against himself, man. He's trying to beat his time, and he just can't do it, man. He's been doing this for 23 hours. He's been trying to farm this one fucking player.
Hi, my name is Jason Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online.
Sorry. Got one player, man. Hey, people are saying that 12 million are playing the game, bro. It's collector of stuff, yeah. This is so funny, man.
multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded. And it had a major drop-off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the server's effectively died. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't,
you can.
Most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we can see that there's license problems. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had licensed to them for 10 years. And that means that it would
Wait, so you have to pay a license to put a car in your game? So Mercedes wants you to pay the money if you display a Mercedes in your game. Interesting. I didn't know that. For brands, I guess, yeah, you put a Mercedes logo on it. I don't know if you're allowed to make the same model, but you put, like, instead of a Mercedes star, you put Patrick star on it. Then it's just the Patrick's. It's not the same car. What are you talking about? We have a different type of star here, bro. Like, I don't know if that's allowed, but yeah, okay.
Reopen for negotiation. I understand that's speculation, but I've seen this type of deal many times in the industry while I've been working it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people who say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players.
See, like,
anyway,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem.
But their idea is, we don't want the publisher to turn this into a single player. We don't want the publisher to keep on running the servers. We want the publisher to give us the ability to host our own servers, to our own servers, so that we can host the game, and then other people, we can invite them to play with us.
If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV, and even if I don't play anymore, League of Legends, or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, even phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practices, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay.
That's what I think so too. Mostly like the single player experience. So like, for example, let's take Diablo 3. Might be a hot take, but you should be able to play this completely offline. Let's say you play only offline. You cannot ever join an online game with your character, but you should be able to play the story, the game, everything on your local machine, because you bought the game to play that experience. You also bought the online experience, but it goes both ways. You can play it online, you can play it offline. That's my opinion. And so if, let's say, the Diablo servers, the Blizzard, just dies off, which will never happen, but let's, live in a dream world, I would still want to play Diablo 3. I spent like $100 on the game. Again, it's gone. I can't play this anymore. Like, come on, that would be stupid. And having a law that prevents them from completely shutting this down, I think that would be nice.
Politicians generally don't care about video games, so this isn't a big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to the constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn to legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers.
True,
and there's some kind of middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off
that's true.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to send
this needs to be more clear.
He's right. Cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're into this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change.
So what do you guys think when you bought Diablo 3 or Diablo 4? Did you buy a license to play the game or did you buy the game to play the story? I bought Diablo 3 so I could play together with my friend.
You are not purchasing the game. You're not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience.
So like a gamer would say like he's completely wrong here. I bought the game. I want to play the game. I don't give a shit about the license. Like, so this is a difficult question to answer. Let's say someone buys a live service game, the crew game, and he bought that to race in the game. He bought the game. For him, he bought the game, okay? He's just a gamer, some dude that wants to race cars. You know, the one good that's still racing right now. You know, he's still racing to this point. Okay, he's playing the game. He doesn't care about any of the multiplayer shit.
It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and won't be allowed to push back on it. You're not going to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that, and I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. If we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions that we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheated them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that.
And you guys get banned in Diablo 3? You can, right? So you bought a license to the game. That answers my question. However, I think he's right about the politicians not caring about a lot about games. Like, many of them don't understand how they work. That's just how it is. Okay, I think he overlooks this. Most politicians just don't understand games.
Of the game console to protect their safeguards against sophisticated theft or piracy, to help the piracy video game software.
The piracy video game software?
To help the piracy video game software.
Do you at least read this into the mirror the night before you show up and testify in front of the committee? Or do you just write this on the bus on the way to the legislative building the same way that I did my earth science homework in 8th grade?
Software and hardware have security features that are built into them, and they're known as technical protection measures or digital locks. These locks prevent the play of any unauthorized game. Put simply, if a video game console's firmware runs a verification check on a game and it is not a legitimate copy, the video game won't play the console.
What the fuck is she talking
The video
about?
game won't play the console.
No, but seriously, my favorite part of this is how the lobbyist that's sitting next to her, when she says that the video game will play the console, it's like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. The video game will play the console. The piracy data, lithium-ion battery, latest security will explode.
Okay, so after watching the Pirate Software video, I, for the first time in my life, and I've been playing games for essentially all my life, have heard the distinction between a license to play the game and buying a game. In my stupid opinion, because I see myself as the stupid gamer here, I totally thought that I would buy a game every time I pressed the purchase button on anything I bought. So I didn't even know about this, that this was a thing. I never once heard a company come out and say, hey, we sell you this license to the game. No, it always is, New World, out now, play for free or play on this date. You know, it's always, there's never really an advertise, never in the mix of, like, there's even a distinction going on. Like, okay, I'm a dumb gamer. I should do my own research. However, I think that's misleading. Just because they don't say it doesn't mean it's not in the TOS. Yeah, but I mean that most people don't read this TOS. You could call it a dark pattern in selling games, whatever. I never knew that there was a distinction between the two. No one is gonna make that research. Like, very little people are gonna watch YouTube videos on it, and even fewer people are gonna read the TOS. Come on. But yeah, anyways, now that that is out of the way, I was interested in seeing what Asmongold, which I consider a gamer, would think about this initiative and whether he would be supportive. My assumption was that yes, he would be supportive of this. And so we're gonna watch the Asmongold's take. Next, I've actually watched it in twice the speed. So if you watch on twice the speed right now, you should probably tone it down a little bit, otherwise you won't understand anything. I'm gonna quickly watch this to get some context from the gamer's perspective.
Basically, they're trying to add a law. No one may be deprived of his or her possessions except in the public interest or in the cases under the conditions provided under the law, subject to fair compensation, being paid in good time for their loss. So basically, I completely agree with this. I want to say I completely 100%, 200% absolutely agree with this. So let's talk about why I agree with this. The main reason why is because...
So, like, I knew this was gonna happen. I knew this was gonna happen.
If you buy something, you should be able to use it. And I think the developer... Like, so I have no problem if a developer has a live service game. I think that you should have to play on their version of the game. Like, that's fair. But if they shut down the servers, I don't think that they should have the legal authority to shut down private servers that exist in place of the official servers. So, for example, like, let's say World of Warcraft gets shut down. I'm not a fan of private servers, and I don't think you should make private servers right now because there is a legal way that you can go through to consume the product. But if there is no way that you can go through to consume the product in the way that you initially bought it, then you should be able to remedy that yourself. So if you have a game and they shut down the servers, you should be able to make your own server in place of that, and they should not be able to shut that down because they are not providing a service anymore. It's that fucking simple. Yeah. So that's what I think. When they abandon it, it should become private. Exactly. So that's what I think you should be able to do. Time for the USA to implement this too? Yeah, exactly. I agree. I'm definitely. How does that work with continuously updated game? Well, simple. It's the same as it works with Classic WoW right now. People play Classic WoW, and everybody likes Classic WoW, and it's the same patch that it's been for 10 years. Basically, I know they did a couple of updates for consistency, etc. But for the most part, it's been pretty much the exact same. So yeah, you just do the exact same thing. So the government's gonna force the developers to pay for the service if the game is essentially dead. You're a retard. We got a retard in the chat. We got a fucking idiot that don't know how to listen. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Shut up, you fucking idiot. Get the fuck out of here. Trying to have a conversation.
What Asmongold is saying is you should be able to make a private server of the game if the live service of the game has ended, because the one guy that was still playing the crew game, you know, the one guy that was still cruising around in that game, he unfortunately could no longer play the game once they shut down, you know, and so maybe he should be able to make a private server so he can still play the game.
This would require publishers to leave games they have sold to customers in a working state at the time of shutdown, without requiring any further connection to them or affiliated parties for the games to function. How they would do this would be up to them. This would also apply to free-to-play games that contain microtransactions, because if you purchased a microtransaction as a good, then the game is made unplayable, well then you just lost your goods.
You did, and it's like basically your waifu evaporates. Like that's it, it's gone. Like the game goes into service, all of your SSR 5-star characters are deleted, they're done. Yeah.
The idea here is we're just trying to stop games from being destroyed. That's it.
Yeah, I don't really see why anybody would be against this. This seems like just a good decision.
Okay, I know that he watched Pirate Software's video, and he made a video about him watching Pirate Software's video. But like, guys, the reason why I'm watching this is because he is basically the gamer. He's the person that buys the games. And Pirate Software makes the distinction between buying a license to the game and buying the game. So the point that I want to bring across here is that as a gamer, you don't know that you're buying a license. You think that you're buying a game. And I think we can make a little experiment here. Let's say Diablo 3. Now, there's got to be a comparison between the different versions. Diablo 3 for Battle.net, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls expansion, Diablo 3 Rise of the Necromancer expansion. And what does it say? 20 years have passed since the Triumph, blah, blah, now you must return, blah, 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 Battle.net, okay. What I'm trying to look for here, and that's really important, I'm trying to look for the phrase license. I'm trying to figure out where they tell me that I am right now buying a license to the game and not the game. I cannot see anything that makes it obvious. Product details. Let's see. Product details. Genre, platforms, available languages, product requirements. Play in any game region. So I would have to read this end user license agreement to understand, and maybe this is in there. I don't know. How long is this? I'm not going to read this right now. Let's see. Control F. Let's try to find license. If you reside within Europe, Middle East, or Africa, you are accessing the platform use, except for otherwise provided below. Use of the platform is licensed to you by Activision Blizzard UK Limited. So essentially, this is where it is. But it looks like use of the platform. So they're not talking about the game here. They're talking about the platform, which I would assume is Battle.net. The platform. Aha, the Battle.net account to use the platform. You may be required. Yeah, okay, there it is. They specify this. So right, let's search more for license. To play games, you may need to add a game license to an account. There you go. Maybe that's it. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I know that Pirate Software worked here and he's been working on live service games. And so he knows this stuff. But as a gamer, you don't go in here and Google license. You go here. And you see action RPG. And you assume game. So why do I bring this up? Well, because he's talking purely from the perspective of a gamer. He never once mentioned the word license. We don't know that we buy a license. And I think this is where the problem starts. All Steam games are a license, even single player games. They can ban your account anytime. Yeah. And that's what, that was the point what Pirate Software made too. They sell you a license so they can ban you when you do something that's stupid. Exactly. But they can also take away the game from you when they run out of business. Which makes sense from their perspective, but it's very unfriendly for the consumer. I knew that he was going to agree with this, but I wonder what he says to the other part where he's like making comments about the politicians.
Because like, here's the thing, right? It's like if you pay for things inside of a game, like you still spent your fucking money. And I think that if you spend your money on something, you should have some degree of protection for what happens to that thing. Like this whole thing, and this is what these companies do, is they try to take everything like, you know, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, live in a pod, eat the bugs, right? There's a big component of this with owning nothing that's happening a lot, where people buy things, but they don't have any ownership of the thing that they're buying. So for example, like you buy a movie, well, you don't buy a movie, you buy it on Amazon and you don't even really own the DVD. You don't have any autonomy of what you're gonna do with that movie. You can't watch it wherever you wanna watch it. You can't put it in a DVD player somewhere else. You can't do anything, right? Like the level of control that companies can exert over a user after the user has given them money, I think is too big right now. There's too many things that a company can do to control what a user does with something that they've spent their money on. And to me, when somebody says, oh, but you didn't buy it, you bought a license for it, that doesn't really matter because licenses aren't real, right? Like
so he goes into license.
You can't go out in nature and, oh, that's a wild license, right?
You can't definitely support an online game though. Yeah, the point is here, the point about this is that you bring up a private server yourself. But there's another issue with this. I thought about this for a long time too. If let's say you give others the opportunity to host a server so they can make their own private server, for example. When you have a live service game, the way this works is the game runs on the server and then the client just reads the data. So the server has the game running on it, okay? And all of the protections against cheating. Now, if you make that, you don't have to make the source code public, but you bring out the binaries to do that, then potentially you could open yourself up to get around your anti-cheat mechanisms. Now, I don't know if that is justified. I don't know if that opens you up for attacks in the future, because now you use the same anti-cheat in your next game. Now that these binaries have been made public, people have been using them. Maybe people have managed to reverse engineer some stuff. And now you get cheaters in your new game.
So what I'm saying is that this idea of a license needs to fucking change.
It falls in line with other consumer practices.
That's the biggest thing to me, right? This is very clearly a consumer unfriendly practice that is in nobody's best interest other than the companies. There is not a single consumer whose experience with the product is improved because other people cannot make servers whenever that game is no longer being supported officially. Nobody's experience is improved by not allowing this to happen. So it is a pure negative. You should care about this because this is what will happen to other products as well, like refrigerators. It will happen to cars. It will happen as everything becomes electronic and more companies try to transform their products into services so that they can charge you for them more regularly. This will become more and more common until it completely fucking controls everything.
So here's what I think the problem is. This doesn't say license anywhere. This screams game to anyone. I'm buying the external Eternal Collection. I'm buying Diablo 3. I'm buying the Battle Chest. It says Diablo 3. It doesn't say license to play Diablo 3. I just clicked buy now. By clicking buy now, you represent that you are an authorized user of this payment method and you agree to the end user license agreement and to the Blizzard's terms of sale. And then to the right, it shows me Diablo 3 Eternal Collection Rise of the Necromancer. This is what I get. It doesn't say license anywhere. And I think that's why people are angry. When this game all of a sudden is gone. I bought the game. I spent a lot of time in the game. I bought microtransactions in the game. And now all of a sudden it's called a license. And now all of a sudden I can't access the license anymore. And this is also what Rossmann talks about in his video. And we're going to watch this now. I want to warn you that this is another 2x speed response. I wanted to get through this a little bit faster because they have taken quite a time to actually do the responses. And I've cut out the pieces that I thought were the most interesting and had the most value to it. He's also reacting to Pirate Software's take, but yeah, I think he brings up some interesting points, and so just watch for yourself.
There's a game called The Crew. This game is playable online when you connect to a server, but it also has a campaign mode and has single player modes that are considerably usable or viable. There are people out there that like this.
Wait, The Crew has a single player game mode? Pirate Software didn't talk about that. The Crew Motorfest single player campaign, is that it? It has a single player campaign, but then unfortunately his point from yesterday doesn't make much sense. Okay, well, we still have to factor in the license you have to pay the car dealers.
And after Ubisoft decided to shut down the server, this single player mode was no longer able to work. And this aggravated a lot of people that paid for the game. This game was not advertised as a service. There are games that are advertised as a service, but this was advertised as a game that you purchased, that you bought and paid for. And again, the meaning of the word purchase in America used to mean something with regards to ownership. If I bought a game and I have a copy of the game, you know, I kind of figure like I can keep playing that game in single player mode without having to connect to your server. So
this brings us back to my point. I was taking a look at Diablo 3 just now. It is not advertised as a service. It is advertised as a fucking game that I buy. I didn't see anything that says service or license. Nothing.
There's a lot of people off, including Mr. Ross Scott, who decided to try and push an initiative called Stop Killing Games, and you can read about that over here. You can read all the specifics of it. This is an EU initiative here. This is not a bill. This is not even a draft bill or a law. This is the EU's version of we've written down something on a napkin for consideration. Let's see if we can turn it into something later. Now, there's a person who really dug into this with a lot of criticism, and he's quite popular on YouTube. Mr. Pirate Software over here, name's Thor. And from 10 hours and 24 minutes to 10 hours and 41 minutes in this particular video, he goes over everything that he believes is functionally wrong and useless with this campaign from the perspective of a video game developer. And a lot of people have been just shitting on him in the comments relentlessly, and I've had a lot of people email me shitting on him as well. And I don't think that's really appropriate. Here you're actually hearing the criticisms from the perspective of a video game developer that's whether you like it or not is actually trying to engage in good faith. So just randomly shitting on this guy, I really think that's a crappy thing to do, and I don't think it's appropriate. If I'm understanding it right, and feel free to correct me if I'm not, Mr. Thor, you believe that the initiative is too vague and it needs to be specific to single player games that don't require server support. He's arguing that this would burden video game developers, so you would have to design games with this initiative in mind, that they are going to have to be playable even when the manufacturer, I'm so used to dealing right here, when the publisher and developers turn off the server. The third is that there's some code that cannot be provided to customers because you can have licensing agreements on particular code where it's only available to the game developer, but they're not licensing the ability to give it to you.
Yeah, he's right here. If you use physics, for example, let's say you open source your game. You can't. because you're using physics. You bought a license to physics.
And he states that retroactively applying this to all games would be a disaster. The law should, the law should not be retroactive. This is reasonable. Just completely shit on this guy, in my opinion, is not the way to get things done. You're also not going to get buy-in for people in the industry. And even if people in the industry don't particularly agree with you, you would rather at least kind of try and meet them in some way where instead they'll say, listen, I don't like this, versus I will dedicate my life to ensuring that this doesn't pass. Initiatives, they're not draft bills. So in the United States, like we'll have an idea, you'll have a draft bill. With right to repair, there are bills from 2015 that were not passed until 2022 or 2023. There's literally 6 to 8 years of amendments that will go on before anything is passed. And that often requires input from all the parties that will be affected by it. This over here is not even a draft bill. This is an initiative. So this is like going to McDonald's and I don't have a pen. I'm going to use ketchup on a napkin to draft out an idea. So I can understand why somebody would be concerned, but it's essentially written on a napkin. A lot of this stuff is stuff that will be changed with time. Even if the stakeholders of this don't want to change, it's going to get changed with time. This is written on a napkin. There's no real genuine legalese here. He does quote from different articles, and we're going to go over some of those articles later. But again, this is not a law. Secondly, this initiative is not going to require games to be updated retroactively. When a right to repair bill passes, they don't have to go back through all their hardware from 1990 through 2023 and make parts and schematics and diagrams available, because that would be fairly unreasonable. What it usually means is not only does it not apply retroactively, it also applies in the future. So a bill that's passed in 2022 may say in it, this does not apply to anything created before May of 2024. So not only are they not going to require that this particular piece of legislation apply retroactively to everything, it also usually doesn't even apply until a date far into the future. The EU may do things a little bit differently, but from what I've seen, they have a date into the future, even in the EU, as to when it is they are going to apply. So I can completely understand a video game developer saying, do I really have to go back and patch code from 2004 for this? The amount of resources that may take a smaller studio or smaller developer, that really is the type of thing that will be burdensome on them. It will be burdensome on a large company, but they pay for it. Whereas a small company, I can imagine.
It will basically make it impossible to have live service games. Yeah.
Bankrupt over it. That's not
they're already bankrupt, and then they have to do this as well.
Applying that case. Now when it comes to live service gaming, there is this thing with advertising. If you're advertising a game as $5 a month, you are paying for this game as a service. You're paying $5 a month for the game. It runs on our server. We can shut this down at a given point in time, and once we shut it down, we will no longer charge you money. That's an honest transaction right there. And even if I don't like that model very much, I can respect the truth in advertising that exists here. The problem that I have is with a different type of live service game, where it is not sold as a live service game. It is sold as a game that you purchase. Something like The Crew, from what I see, and to be clear, I'm kind of ignorant here because I'm not really into the whole live service game thing. It doesn't look like this was sold as a live service game. It was sold in a manner where I, as a consumer who's not really hyper into the modern gaming community, would imagine that what I was purchasing was a game that I can continue to play the single player without ever having to think about Ubisoft shutting down something into the future. If I bought that game, I would expect that I could continue playing it. So for me, it's not even necessarily about single player versus multiplayer. It's about how it was sold. If you sold the game as a purchase, that's different than you selling a rent leased service where it's $5 a month. I know at the end of the month I have to pay. If I don't pay at the end of the month, I don't get the game. And if you shut down the server, which you're allowed to do at any given time, I will not be billed anymore. There's a difference in the honesty there. And I think a lot of the problem that consumers have is not necessarily the concept of live service games versus
Diablo does a monthly fee, though. That's the point. If the Blizzard ever shuts down, you will not be able to play Diablo 3. After watching this part, and I've talked about this earlier in the video already, I had to take a look at The Crew and then realized that The Crew was actually never really advertised as a service, live service, licensed, any of this stuff game. It was advertised as a product you buy and can play. And then in the fine print in the bottom, it's like, but you need an internet connection, sir. You cannot play this without the internet. Which I think is dumb. The Crow Motorfest Standard Edition. Okay, so you could buy this per month, or you could buy this. And then down here, it says, buy and download the Motorfest? No. If I have to scroll down even further, then that's some bullshit here. It says literally game. It doesn't say license. It doesn't say service. Where I were talking about, like, how far do I have to scroll down to figure out that I need an internet connection? Scroll down even further? Sorry, but how many of you guys scroll down to the very bottom? But be honest here. And I don't even see it. It doesn't stick out at all. Bottom right, internet connection permanent. Internet connection required to play. I always read from the bottom to top. It's not even a matter of being upfront about it, even if they say it's just not okay. Yeah, I think you're right too. Yeah, it says internet, nothing about service. True. There's not a single time where they say service or license. They just say game. My point is the wording. Another point that he talks about in the video, which I think is very interesting, is the license agreement for putting certain cars in your video games. So, for example, if you had a Mercedes car in your game, you put a Mercedes star on the car, then you would have to pay license fees to Mercedes. And it turns out that, or maybe it was, I've not made games that long ago, Gran Turismo doesn't have the issues that modern games have, where they have to pay license fees to, let's say, Mercedes, and if these car manufacturers, they have to pay them monthly, it seems like. And unfortunately, or they have like a contract for 5 years, and after the contract ends, they have to pay them again, which obviously is very bad if you can't support your game anymore. And so he goes into that, and I think he brings up some interesting points.
If I bought this game, I don't really care about your licensing agreements for the code. I don't care about your licensing agreements for any of this stuff, because back in the day, we didn't have to care. When you bought a game like Gran Turismo 2 on your PlayStation 1, you didn't have to worry about any of this. And there was no worry about licensing. All the cars in that game, a lot of them were real cars. Whatever licensing they worked out with any of the manufacturers of those cars, whatever license it was a license.
True. What happened to Gran Turismo on the PlayStation 1? Do they still have to pay the license to this? I don't think so. There's got to be some sort of agreement where you pay once. No, they have a better deal while back then. Now Gamedev's got bad deal. These days there are less and less agreements to pay once. Companies want to have always money income.
Since I could continue to play Gran Turismo 2 today in my PlayStation 1. Either A, the code they used for the physics, I don't know what they did. Either A, they bought a right to use the code and to have you to have a lifetime ability to use that code in that particular game. Or B, they wrote the code for that themselves. Whatever it is, somehow, some way, back in the day, this was not an issue. And if the issue right now is that the licensing agreements for code or the licensing agreements for trademark, copyright, anything going into the game are such such that you literally have to disable the game, even if it is capable of being run locally in single player mode. A law like this would throw a wrench into the works. Yeah, I would argue that that's a wrench that needs to be thrown at some point in time. Because if the people licensing this code, or if the people licensing these trademarks are doing it in such a way that they're literally handcuffing the developers to the point where they couldn't even give you a server binary if you wanted it, that's a serious problem. Because this is something that I've really thought about for a while. Why not just give the users the server binary? Well, they may literally not legally be allowed. The developers may be handcuffed.
Yeah, that, and like you could figure out how they do anti-cheat and then get around that. And then in the next game they know what you're doing. And now all of a sudden you have to develop a new anti-cheat.
Result of their arrangements with the people that they license the code or the trademarks, the copyright, whatever's in the game from. And if that's the case, if a law like this were passed, I imagine that would be kind of, I hope, to be clear, I'm not going to say it would be, I hope that would be a negotiating stick for the developers and the publishers to say to the people that they're licensing the stuff from, hey man, these licensing agreements don't work anymore. I can't sell my game to hundreds of millions of people. I can't even offer this to them if you're going to do this. And at that point, I imagine that it would result in some sort of different negotiating style.
Yeah, I think he's right here. So basically maybe right now it is, let's say Mercedes has the power here and says, no, you pay me monthly. I don't give a shit what you're doing. You make a live service game, you pay me monthly, you get monthly payments. I want a share of that. Now, if there's a law, now they can't do this anymore. They can renegotiate the terms, and then it might be a one-time payment, which would be better. He then explains that in order to release the server binaries, you can't actually release the source code, because if you were to release the source code, for those of you who are watching this, you probably have been developing games or dabbled into developing games already. When you develop a game, and let's say you want to do a 3D game, Souls-like, you want to make sure that your physics is on point, the collision detection is on point. And there's a library called physics, and you can get that. It's actually been used in, I think, Elden Ring and even Dark Souls. And this library will help you do the collision detection to have collision detection in your game, and then Asmongold will not be angry about an attack hitting him while he's clearly out of range, or ducking, or hitting, or jumping over. And so if you buy the license to this library, so basically you call this library, you go to him, it's like, hey brother, are these two shapes colliding? And he's like, yes sir, they are colliding. And then you get the result back. You're using their code. It's their code. You don't own the code. And you cannot make this public. You're not allowed to do that, because then you would have to give out a license to everyone. And so there's another problem that he brings up, which I think is very interesting. And then the fact that even if you did that, it doesn't mean that the setup of making a private server is easy. So there would be customers that would still be mad that the game shut down because you couldn't pay the servers anymore. And these people, because they're lazy, you know, almost all the gamers are lazy. We're lazy. We would complain that we couldn't set up the server because it's too difficult. You need to connect to a Docker, AVS stuff, other server things. You know, I'm not a big server guy, so like there's a bunch of things that you have to read into this. You know, it's like, who's gonna do that? Some people will, but some people won't. You know, and then the waiting period would suck, of course.
If going forward, they knew that they had this requirement, then the game may be developed differently. And he makes a good point here, which is you would have to rethink how you develop the game in order to be in compliance with this, and that could cause extra work. That would mean thinking about how to create this for local infrastructure, as well as creating it for if you're connecting to 5 to 10 different servers somewhere else. This would require one of two things. Behind door number one, you would provide the code open source and say, here you go, like, have fun. Set up your own S3 bucket, set up your own AWS, set up your own Microsoft Azure, set up your own Snowflake shit. Like, we gave you the source code, have fun. Customers can be unreasonable. So I understand when he says, if I make the server available, if I say, okay, fine, here's your server, learn how to set up Docker on your own, have fun. Even though that would technically be complying with the law, he would have a bunch of customer service requests that would be a royal pain in the ass. Or let's say you don't want to open source your game. You have no desire to open source your game. You want to keep it closed source. I understand that. You would have to design a server in a way.
Couldn't you do it like this? Let's say you're Ubisoft. Okay, Ubisoft doesn't go away, but they shut down the servers for the game. Let's say the crew. But the crew has microtransactions in the game that will obviously be put into Ubisoft's pocket money. Now, you give someone else the possibility to run this game on their server. But you keep the microtransactions so that if you buy microtransactions in the game, it is still going to Ubisoft. It's basically infinite money. Someone else is paying for the server, you're getting the money. You know, that's what the developers need to do. Just like a WoW private server, right? Ubisoft still wouldn't like it. They wouldn't like free money. I don't know. It's like free advertisement and money. I don't know about that.
And I understand the game developer's perspective, which is I want to develop my game the way I want to develop my game. But I also understand the consumer's perspective, which is you use the word purchase here. You did not use the word service game that expires in a particular time. The instruction manual does not say if I don't pay $5 a month after this date, it won't work. The manual nor the box say that this game is going to turn off in 7 years.
Yes.
I want to keep playing my game. I understand that. So then it becomes an issue of which one of these is more important. And in my opinion, the one that leans a little bit more towards ownership is the one that matters. If you have a live service game where you say this is a service that you're subscribing to that is different from calling it a purchase, and my problem primarily with all of this has been when somebody calls something a purchase when it is not. You cannot use a contract to redefine the word purchase. If you call something purchase, but you have the ability to take it away from me, that is a rental or that is a lease. Do not call it something it is not, and do not use contracts to define it something it is not.
Yeah,
now, you may think as a result of this, everybody's just going to call it a purchase of a revocable license. In the US, you could probably get away with that shit. In the EU, they do have clauses regarding misleading terms in contracts, so I don't believe in the EU you'll be able to get away with that.
The US is always fucked, man. It's so funny. I feel so sorry for you guys in the US, man. You don't even have like proper healthcare, man.
If you were saying that what you're buying is a fucking game, you're purchasing a game, in that case, they're not gonna be able to get around this. They're not gonna be able to do some sneaky shit that they probably could in the US.
50,000 to fix your teeth, man. Like, holy shit.
The consumer needs the ability to make an informed decision. If you're selling it as something that can go away at any given time, or you're selling it saying, on October 7th, 2025, this game will never work again, fine. But if you don't have that in the terms, and it's not obvious to the customer when they're buying it, that's where it's screwed up. And Thor said, this is essentially paraphrasing, this is shitting on the developer's desk and telling the developer they have the problem of all the shit that was placed on their desk. I don't like when somebody else just shits on my desk either. This is why this initiative came up in the first place. The reason this became an initiative is because so many companies were shitting on their consumer's desk by saying, I know that you bought a game, not a service, but we're going to take it away from you. When you've had millions of people that have had their desk shit on, I don't think that they're shitting on the developer's desk. I think from the perspective of that gamer that bought that game that no longer works, what they're doing is they're taking the shit off of their desk and they're shoveling it onto the developer and publisher where it belongs. People are sick and tired of shit like Destiny 2, Titanfall.
He's right, though.
Vision, just many others that screw you over when it comes to...
Yeah, take your shit and take it back, bro. I don't want it. It stinks. Now, and this brings me to the last part, which is, in my opinion, very interesting. A key point that unfortunately got not talked about enough in the video so far, and Pirate Software actually brings this up. So for example, if we go to Stop Killing Games, which is the first video, and I'm pretty sure he's pinned that message to the second video too, we'll take a look in a second. He's talking about the monetization. Let's do a little roundup for everyone in the comments saying the same stuff. Why shouldn't we have the right to the server binaries so we can keep playing these games? Are you going to allow monetization of these servers or not? If we don't allow monetization, who would be the party that enforces non-monetization on the server? So essentially, let's say there's a server somewhere in Russia. How are you going to get to that server and tell them to stop monetizing it? It's difficult to do, of course. He's right there. If it's the government, I feel like we are making an insane amount of red tape. I don't really know. Like, I can't speak to this. I'm not a big government guy. If it's the original company, then it doesn't work if they shut down. If the company shut down, they can't enforce payment anymore. But my take on this, and it's actually very funny, Ubisoft could be still operating, Ubisoft still exists, they could still earn money through microtransactions in the game. And so they could still earn money while not being able to pay the servers. And they could somehow code this in that the money will flow to them. Now, does that leave them open to attack and some others will try to get around this? I'm pretty sure they will. If we don't allow monetization, who's going to pay for the hosting if the servers cannot be monetized? That's another big question. So for example, if we have private servers of World of Warcraft, usually there's some form of monetization, whether that be donations or GMs being bribed to give special items, you know, that we have seen that happening. So there is some form of a monetization that you would have to stop. And I don't think we can do that. It doesn't even work with Blizzard private servers at the moment, World of Warcraft. So he's right there. That's an issue. If we cannot be monetized, then these servers will also eventually shut down due to cost. I'm pretty sure there will be some shady ones, but he's right. Oh, we don't up preserving. I think he means we don't end up preserving games like this. We just shift their dev down the road. Okay, we can't monetize. What if we do? This leads to a really weird attack potential if people can monetize the servers. You can make an awesome game that has a small community. I want to monetize that game and run my own servers. Yes, then I create a shitload of bots and constant exploits to erode the game and your business. So he's right here. That can happen. You know, you make a good game and then you know I'm a shady person. I know that I can attack them and I can essentially try to bring down the game and the devs can't do anything about it. I'm pretty sure it is possible to do that. However, most people are angry that they can't play their beloved single player games anymore. They can't play the game they paid for anymore. We would have to see. Like, it is an interesting point that I don't have an answer to this because it hasn't happened. It is technically possible. I'm pretty sure this can be protected by laws. Because the ultimate issue with these games is not that bots and exploits kill the games. It's because people are just no longer interested. Your business closes and now you have to give out the server binaries to keep the game in a playable state. Yeah, I can now profit off of your work via private servers. So I think monetization should not be allowed, or it should be a mix, whether that be through microtransactions or some other form of donations that allows to keep the server going, but then the microtransactions in the game could go to Ubisoft, the initial developer. There's always a way to set up a PayPal account that you can then funnel the money into. This isn't unlikely, as we have seen mass attacks as with Team Fortress 2. We actually see the echoes of this in the mobile game market already. The only defense right now is DMCA or other takedown measures. Devs legitimately have very little protections as is, and this would erode that further. This creates an incentive for abuse where the abuser is protected as they are within their legal rights to operate said abandoned game servers. Now the rest of the stuff is him, and I don't condone this. Please don't do this. defending himself against some serious yapping from the community and attacks on him, which it is a discussion, and I think it is important to have such a discussion. We need to see both sides. He is the side of the developer more so than the side of the gamer, potentially, which is not wrong. We need to poke holes into everything that we do here to make sure that further down the line we can enjoy our games, because that is what it's ultimately about. And we want to be able to sell games as developers. I'm making a game myself, so I know how that feels. So maybe I'll change my stance in the future, don't know. But for the time being, I'm a huge gamer too, and I can see why people are being frustrated. These games just go away and I spend money in them. This sucks. But I could also see that if you're making a game and you're an indie developer, for example, let's say you want to make a live service game, you don't have much money, you don't have a lot of big team, don't have a big supporter in your back that helps you. And then all of a sudden you get fucked in the ass by some bots or, you know, someone else trying to fuck your game over, and then people leave negative reviews because you can't handle it. And then all of a sudden you have to give up your binaries because you can't pay the servers anymore. Of course this sucks. And then all of a sudden you can't even monetize this anymore because the monetization purely goes to the private servers. Of course this sucks. So there needs to be a discussion, because ultimately we as the customer spend money. Catherine Gunther, Director, Entertainment Software Association. Oh God. For more information, visit legwa.government. Okay, let's see.
Of the game console to protect their safeguards against sophisticated theft or piracy, to help the piracy video game software.
The piracy video game software?
To help the piracy video game software.
Do you at least read this into the mirror the night before you show up and testify in front of the committee? Or do you just write this on the bus on the way to the legislative building the same way that I did my earth science homework in 8th grade?
Software and hardware have security features that are built into them, and they're known as technical protection measures or digital locks. These locks prevent the play of any unauthorized game. Put simply, if a video game console's firmware runs a verification check on a game and it is not a legitimate copy, the video game won't play the console.
What the fuck is she talking
The video
about?
game won't play the console.
No, but seriously, my favorite part of this is how the lobbyist that's sitting next to her, when she says that the video game will play the console, it's like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. The video game will play the console. The piracy data, lithium-ion battery, latest security will explode.
Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Leave it at this. Okay. I agree with every point he made. Like, best video actually on this. I think this is the best video. Like, I had the same points before going into the video, and he completely, yeah. This is so bad. Oh my God. I agree. Yeah, his points all make sense. Like, I think he has the best video on this. He explores all avenues. Ultimately, I agree with this guy. I agree with him. Yeah, I agree with you. Hello.